because when someone says something, it's important for them to be heard, for them to know that whoever they're speaking to, they are listening to them. So understanding how someone else communicates makes me a better listener to what they're saying and makes me better in terms of responding to them.
This week on Great Conversations, I have the pleasure of chatting to Abhilash Menon, who is the Senior Sales Executive at UL Solutions. Abby, welcome to Great Conversations. How are you today?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me. This is brilliant.
So, we're going to start in the traditional way, which is I'm going to ask you the question that has been left by our previous guest. So, Abby, if you could be any age for the rest of your life, what would you be and why?
All right, excellent. Uh, it's a tricky one because I possibly have two options for it, but I'd say that the age of 28 for me personally was something that was an incredible experience for me living in the UK. I'd come to the UK to do my MBA when I was 26, lived a great life at Cambridge, met amazing people over there. And then Garima, my wife, joined me over here in London, and we sort of had our first experience of living an independent life away from home and living in London, living the London life, enjoying all the things that London has to offer. We did a lot of different things, enjoyed life over here, and sort of experienced it in a way that sort of set us up for what was next in our life. So that's sort of, I would say, purely from the sense that I was able to do a lot more, make every minute of my life in that one particular year count as much as possible.
The 28 and sort of this I guess coming of age and experiencing London for everything that it has to offer, and it's I'm just like really interested, what was one of the biggest I guess gifts or things that was so transformative for you in that year that it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it.
Yeah, I think it was just experiencing everything that was new. Because obviously, I've lived my life in, coming from Mumbai. I've lived pretty much all my life there. I've traveled around. Having my dad used to live abroad, mostly in the Middle East. So I've traveled quite a bit around there, done a lot of different things. But there's always a family aspect to it. Even living in India, there's a cultural aspect to multiple things that you do, etc. And this was obviously talking a good decade or so back. So, times were different then, go to India, now it's different. So when we came over here to the UK and living in London specifically, the options of going out, one of the things that was completely free for me to do was, I could go out walking everywhere. Whereas in, living in Mumbai, wherever I wanted to go, I had to drive, deal with traffic, do all those things. Living in London, especially because we lived at London Bridge, which meant that most of the things where we wanted to go was all walking distance. So just experiencing different things, just the food, just hanging out with friends whenever you wanted to, because everyone at that point, I don't think any one of our friends had started families at that point. So all of us were really free to do whatever we wanted to do. So it was just great to build relationships, and those relationships that I built at that point, they're still intact. They're really strong, even though a lot of people have moved away from London. The relationships are really strong with them. And it was just the experience of knowing independence, complete independence, so to speak, was something that I would say is sort of built those core memories.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that about freedom, because you're so right, aren't you? Like it gets to that, and I think there is something about that age of like you're slightly senior in your career where you're earning money, and as you say, maybe you haven't, you could be married, but just don't have children, and so you suddenly have these options that are open to you that you haven't experienced before when you were a lot younger. So yeah, I really get what you're saying, and also I do you know what? I love what you're saying about walking, because I remember one of the big things for me when I left London and moved to South Africa that was really difficult was my inability to walk. Like, as you say, in London, you can be, I mean, I don't know if I call it walking, it was probably more stumbling, but like, 1 in the morning and you sort of, you're like stumbling around, but you get home and you're just out all the time. And I actually, it's so interesting because I felt my freedom was curtailed when I lived in South Africa because I couldn't do that as easily because I had to be more mindful about where I, my walking around at what time with who. Like, so it's interesting that you're linking walking with independence and freedom because I felt that myself actually the other way around.
Absolutely, I agree, and I think, I mean, there is. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's absolute huge amount of independence. Now that when I go back to India, there is this aspect of convenience. There's an aspect of things are available to you much easily. When I'm going out and about, I don't need to drive anywhere. I could get a driver. I've got an app that I can ask for a driver to come and pick me up in my own car, and they drive me around. I could have a party all through the night, come back home quite safely. I could do all of this. The convenience factor back home in India is amazing. But, that there are still dependencies. Like I'm still dependent on other people to do things for me. I need all of those. Whereas here, I could do everything myself. And again, this is just going back to that age where I just didn't need anybody, and just it was just me and Garima, and that was our world, and we could just do whatever we wanted. And just as you said, there was this aspect of, from the work perspective as well, there is a bit of seniority that comes in. You're earning a decent wage, etc. But also the fact that at that point was finishing the MBA gave me time to sort of think about what I wanted to do. And that was quite important at that point as well, because I did dabble in a few different things before I sort of settled down into what I want to do. And so that was the age where I was trying out different things. I started my own business around that time as well. After I'd finished working for a consulting firm, I started my own business. We did a few things at that point, and that sort of allowed me to experiment, do things again. And again, at that point, the convenience of doing those different things was amazing in London. I could just push myself and do those things, different aspects. So yeah, 28 was a great age.
Oh my god, it sounds it like it really, really, really was. And like how because like freedom for you and the autonomy of choice. I mean, you mentioned it like trying a few things in terms of a business and yeah, consulting and sort of dabbling in a few things. Where did you get the courage to do that? Because I think that takes a lot of courage to try things and to not settle quickly and to sort of live in that space of yeah, who knows, and just I'm just gonna ride this wave and see where I end up is very much what I'm hearing from you. But often but that uncertainty can drive a lot of anxiety for a lot of people. So I'm really curious, like what was it that enabled you to live in that sphere and just sort of be okay with it?
You know what? You asking me that question has sort of made me think that again, because pretty much all my life, everything was sort of charted. It was, what I was going to do was pretty much defined based on where I was studying, what I was doing, and especially growing up in the 80s and 90s India, everything was about, yep, you're going to finish off your studies, you're going to do either you're going to be a doctor or an engineer. If you're decently good at studies, that's your two options. And then after that, you become an engineer. uh, Typically, if you can, then you go out either to the US or somewhere to do a master's degree and then get your next job, whatever it might be. That was sort of, and that's exactly what my career path was at that point. I was a reasonably good student during my engineering days, and then which did mean that I got a few options to go do my studies in the US at that point. Uh, I guess it changed at that moment when I did get those options to go to the US. I actually decided a completely different choice, saying that, you know what, I've done enough of studies now. I really wanted to get into the weeds of it at that point. And I started working in India. I took up a job, uh, which again was very much towards what I was doing during my engineering, all my likings, etc. Brilliant, one of the best engineering firms in India, did all of that. But I think one of the key influences growing up was my mom, who was like open to saying, yep, you do what you like to do. But there's obviously restrictions in terms of what we could do, because growing up, we were decently well to do, but not enough to say, yep, throw everything out of the water and you could do whatever you want. There was a career path charted to get to stability. But then it was around that time, around the end of engineering, when sort of Garima and I were together. And when we were together, she sort of, I would say, has been an influence in my life to say, do something different, whatever you want to do, or question the things that you're doing. That was quite important because I never always, it wasn't in my DNA to immediately question everything that I was doing because I was told this is what you need to do and you do it. I was very curious by nature, but I didn't question what I needed to do. I would say with Garima, she gives me the confidence to say, you know what, go out there, do different things. Because she's independent, she's fiercely, strongly opinionated in what she wants to do, etc.
The power of a woman, a strong, independent woman. But what you're talking to is the power of relationships, isn't it? Just sort of the depending on who you choose to spend your time with can really determine the outlook and the choices you make in your life. And I feel like it's oftentimes something that we don't really consciously consider, maybe more so when we're younger, but there's the influences and sometimes it's chance and luck, that we end up with these amazing people that, as you say, encourage you to go further and to, I guess it sounds as if Garima's like open the door for your curiosity.
I would say so.
Yeah, so I wanted to like go into that a little bit further because it's one of the things that I personally am obsessed with, which is living the world curiously. Because I myself have experienced so much personal growth and joy by doing that. So I'd love to know, what have you discovered through the power of being curious?
Because I'm so curious, because I constantly in my life just ask why, or I just want to learn. There's a thirst for learning. I've just got this random amount of information in my head that just comes out at any point of time, which allows me to sort of have a conversation with anybody out there. I'm comfortable having a conversation with people doing different things. I'm curious in general, and that allows me to just connect with people in some ways, talk to people, and just generally grow in that sense. Because the more I can then ask, or more I can connect, the more I can learn from them. And there is the aspect of learning for the sake of learning. But no, I think curiosity as such, it just helps me just be better at whatever I'm doing. Even now, where actually the last two job changes which I've done, during my interviews, I've been open with the people that, hey, you do X, Y, and Z, you're doing this, but I've got zero knowledge about that because I've not worked in that space. I've not done this. So because I've had conversations about, how I've picked things up, how I've learned things, how I'm able to do things, they were all confident that I was the right person to, get in there and learn it and then implement certain things. So I guess that's sort of what curiosities helped me eventually at life.
Yeah, I love that. And I love what you're saying about it's just it's that flexibility, isn't it? It sounds like it's flexibility in any situation that you find yourself in. It just sort of is your go-to tool to help you navigate whether it's a conversation or a job. I love it. Yeah, I think it's such a beautiful space to be in for all the reasons that you're talking to as well. How much did curiosity help you when you landed up in the MBA and the UK? Because I know that as well. Like having love of travel, and as you say, like on our MBA program, everyone came from all over the world, and it was amazing. So that ability to be open to different cultural experiences was huge for me because I know when I went into the MBA, I was really blind to, which sounds ridiculous now, but different lived experiences. Like I was conditioned with, the assumption that the way that I live my life or the social norms in the UK is common in the rest of the world. And so, like you said, part of the interpersonal and professional conflicts that I've been in throughout my life have been because of a difference in culture and not appreciating that. And so it is really interesting that you say about, curiosity, like maybe helping navigate those cultural, I guess, clashes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in learning by doing, and which does lead to certain missteps in the way. But as long as you're open to accepting that that was your mistake at that point, and this just apologizing and making sure you don't do that again and learning from it. Coming from India, and especially working in an engineering environment and where you are, talking over one another in a group setting where you trust that environment. If you're in a group, you're sort of trusting that group, that you're all coming from the same space and you're all going towards the same target. That's what you're working towards. And so talking over one another is a very common thing in India. You go to India, and now, when I go back to India, I find that jarring because you don't do that here at all. And so I find that very, very jarring when I go back to India.
I want to know, and I'm really curious. What's the biggest mistake you've made, and have you grown from it?
Even if I've made something, I wouldn't remember because I don't like to be hung up on certain things. And I remember having this conversation with a friend of mine a long, long time back about, do you have certain regrets? And I don't typically hold on to having regrets or things. But I would say, in terms of mistakes or things, that 1 year that I spent at Cambridge, I loved everything that we did. I would just say, if I would have spent a little bit more time before coming to Cambridge to be prepared for it, in terms of also learning a little bit more about the cultural aspect or what needs to be done, etc., from some alumni or things like that, would have helped me apply myself a lot better during the course, which would have then carried forward immediately after the MBA. Because I would say, as much as I loved the year, it was brilliant. I learned a lot. There was a personal growth journey in that 1 year. It also took possibly another year to almost absorb everything and then apply, for me to apply it. And again, that's a personal aspect. I do remember there were loads of people who were like prepared from day one, and they could start to apply things quite quickly, whereas it took me a while to start applying everything. And it was almost like, and as I went through in my professional journey, I was like, actually, you know what? Yeah, this is what I did during the MBA. This is what I learned.
And what advice would you offer? So for anybody who, is in a similar position that you were, of like leaving their home and going to another country to study, what are some of the words of wisdom or advice that you would give to help people be better prepared for, I guess, just the experience to be able to navigate it fully?
Yeah, it's a tricky one. And again, it's tricky one purely based on time. Because when I came, the times were different to what it is now. I think committing to something is important rather than being half-hearted or having some part of it saying, actually, yeah, everything's back home. I'm just going back. Because I think one of the aspects of not being completely open for me was because somewhere at the back of my mind, I had that I'm actually going back to India. I'm not going to be spending my life over here. So committing to that move, committing to moving to a different cultural experience, when you commit to it, you're automatically open to experiencing that environment. You're open to embracing new things, open to understanding the other person's perspective. And so I think committing to a move, committing to whatever you're doing full heartedly would be my advice to anyone in any circumstance, whatever it is, just commit 100%.
Yeah. What was the hardest, or what was the biggest cultural shock when you got to the UK?
I think the cultural aspect of how people communicate. I think I'm still learning that. I think that's going to be a lifelong journey in terms of how people communicate, and I think that's important because it's important to that individual. Because when someone says something, it's important for them to be heard. For them to know that whoever they're speaking to, they are listening to them. So understanding how someone else communicates makes me a better listener to what they're saying and makes me better in terms of responding to them.
So when you like you've spoken about obviously when you were 28 and you were sort of figuring out lots of different things, where did you go? So like you came from engineering background, you worked in India, you did your MBA, and then you sort of came out of your MBA, and where like professionally have you gone since then?
So since then, yes, it's been an interesting journey. So obviously, after I finished my MBA, went into consulting for a bit. Enjoyed it, didn't enjoy it a lot. Then started my own thing for a bit. It was a bit of a lonely journey at that point. And then again, sort of, the engineering call was still inside of me, so started working for another engineering company in the UK. And then later on, I got a call from another company which dealt with safety. And that sort of resonated with me deeply because when I was working in India, at that point, this is like early 2000s, mid 2000s, the culture in India at that point wasn't very safety oriented in the engineering industry as such. So I worked for a very large company and we had really good safety standards there. But even with that, there were sort of slip ups and everything. And I myself once remember being part of a testing rig where something exploded, which was not part of the plan. And literally, I was wearing the safety gear and everything, but literally, two sort of bolts went past just a foot away from me, like two shooting bullets. So it was like a real near death situation. And ever since that point, I sort of took the onus within my team, the organization, to make sure that the safety standards are even higher, doing things, etc. So safety sort of resonates with me quite a bit. So then, when the company came up, I it was a software company dealing with safety. So talking about different industries where people are exposed to dangers on a day-to-day basis. And that with that resonating with me, I've worked with them for the past decade. Been working in the software space, helping people improve their safety standards for people, making sure that people aren't exposed to incidents and accidents.
It's funny because it's like it's an overlooked area, isn't it? Well, I think it is of business. Maybe it's not an industrial business, but this concept of safety, like it's just something that would never even enter my world, to be honest.
It's one of those things where people don't talk about it, and really it shouldn't be talked about because you only talk about it when things fail. If it isn't talked about, it's a good thing. That means things aren't going wrong. And really, you want to use technology as much as possible to improve those safety standards across the board. And so that's what we did. We've been doing and helping people in that front.
And what is the relationship with technology and safety? Like, I'm really curious about that. Like, where does it? Because obviously, we're all AI, and we know how Chat GPT helps us in our jobs. But like, how is technology supporting us to live in a safer environment?
So if I'm building a chemical component, if I'm building a perfume, what's within my perfume, what are the chemicals that go into that perfume, what's the percentage of different chemicals that's in there, what hazards do they pose when I'm transporting, because people don't think, okay, I'm buying that perfume, but really if you think about it, it's alcohol in there. And if you think about alcohol in a large concentration, it could be dangerous. And so when you're transporting that perfume, there's dangers associated with it. How do you make sure people know what those dangers are? How do you make sure what's happening around it? How do you capture that when I'm making that perfume? So all of those aspects. So we use technology to help people manage all of those aspects from the regulatory side of things as well.
Oh my God, I never would have thought of that. I never thought that my bottle of perfume would potentially have chemicals in that then would be dangerous in terms of transportation.
Yeah, so it's amazing.
It is. I feel really naive saying it, but I never realized. So if you like, if you know, 28 was your year of like really leading into curiosity and trying things out and yeah, just experiencing lots of different things and learning. Watch it if we fast forward to when you're 60. What do you want your year age 60 to be like for you? What do you want that year to represent?
What does age 60 represent? Well, honestly speaking, and again, this is like my growth journey. I wouldn't want it to be any different from what it is now, other than the fact that I want it to be mortgage free and with the house, like with a bigger house and all of those things, put the financial aspect aside. But I wouldn't want it to be different to what it is now, where I am, where I'm able to contribute to things what I believe in. I'm able to work in different things, devote time to different causes. I can do all of those different aspects. And that's what I'd like to do because, again, this is an aspect of cultural experience and learning where, where I come from, you're age 58, 60, you are forced into retirement. You retire. But all I can think of is as long as I have my health, and that's the most important thing. And as long as I've got my health, as long as I've got my family around me, I think I'll be happy and just be happy and be able to do more things and contribute to the world around me. I think that's a win for me. And as long as United would have started winning by that time.
No, you'll have gone into administration. They won't exist. They'll be playing in League Two, hopefully. So I love that answer. I love it because it's so representative of the fact that clearly you've built a life around you that enables you to thrive and that just and I love that. I love that you just want more of that in the future. It's so beautiful. So, Mr. Menon, I have a closing tradition on this podcast. So, I ask all of my guests, what is something that other people value that you don't?
One thing I would say is growing up, one thing which I was taught and everyone around spoke about was the importance of having titles, what you are. You sort of were recognized for your title. You were known for that. You were the title. You were a manager. You were a this. You were a that. And I've completely detached myself from that aspect. My importance, my recognition has nothing to do with that title. It all depends on what I'm doing, how I'm contributing on a day to day basis, not just to my workplace, but also to my friends, to my family, to my dog, to everyone around me. I think that's where I put my importance on. And I think that's just me having that change because for the longest period in my life, that importance existed for me as well because that's what I grew up with. And so for me that's important. I think that's important for people to recognize that it's what you do on a day-to-day basis, how you contribute to life is more important than what your title says what it is. You don't be restricted by it and don't be defined by it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think there's something about that developing as you get older as well, isn't it? I think the sort of the title becomes less important and exactly what you're saying, what becomes more important is your ability to show up authentically as your real self. And that's what matters. I love that. Thank you so much, Abby. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Now, I absolutely loved being on the show. I appreciate you inviting me.
This episode reminded me of the richness of experiences that make up our Integrate community. Abby explored curiosity, resilience, and the power of learning, which are qualities that we really deeply value at Integrate. So, if you've been inspired by this conversation and want to be part of a diverse community that supports and uplifts each other, then please go to www.integrate.net and join our community today. You get a 7-day free trial so you can try us out risk free. As always, I want to thank my editor, Stian Ritt, and musician, Jamie Jenkin. Sending you all so much love. Bye for now.